Hey, good day, everybody. Welcome to the Deal Scout. On today's show, we're going to have a conversation with a part-time doctor. We're going to hear his story and kind of talk about how he is a work optional, do things because he wants to do kind of guy. Dr. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Josh. Good to be here.
Yeah. So I'm reading through, the pre-show notes, and we've had a conversation in the green room. But you said that you're moving from, the full-time doctor force into kind of working optional space. What the heck does that mean?
Well, with a lot of doctors, I think you begin with this idea of you're going to help people. It's going to be this super rewarding career. And then it turns into being not as much fun over time as you'd hoped. That the administrative headaches, the bureaucracy, the regulatory, the insurance, the documentation, and it's not really fun anymore. And that's why there's kind of a pandemic of burnout amongst physicians. And what I've seen with myself and other docs is when you hit this point where now you don't have to work as a doctor, and you can limit your schedule to a timeline that you can enjoy, that you start enjoying being a doctor again, and then it becomes work optional that you start choosing to do it rather than having to do it.
Man, what kind of doctor did you become?
I am a urologist. So, or a urologic surgeon, we specialize in the urinary tract and the male reproductive tract.
So if I went back in time to you're 16 years old and say one day you're going to have guys walk into your office and this is what you're going to be doing when you're 16, is that what would you have said?
I would have said you're nuts.
Exactly. So thank you for taking care of people, right? Like, so thank you for becoming a doctor and serving the community. But I see that often. I've interviewed a lot of doctors. I was in the medical field myself, and the high potential for burnout is massive because of we get in it to serve people, but then you got tons of paperwork. You got the bureaucracy. You're dealing with insurance companies and government, and you're dealing with all these things. And you're like, man, I signed up to help people, and it limits us. But you've kind of gone at it a different approach. If you don't have to do it and work there, it adds a new level of freedom and maybe joy. Is that right? Like, explain the process that happened for you.
So yeah, I mean, it really came through burnout. And it's interesting that there was a lot of thought with doctors, if you go back over the past 20 years, that with the move towards being employed and versus your small private practices to bigger groups, that you were taking all the administrative headaches off their plate and you could just focus on being a doctor. The reality is doctors lost control. So you don't have control of your workflow, you don't have control of your schedule, you don't have control of all these things. So those things that we thought would decrease doctor stress by getting rid of have actually become worse. And so like the original idea of electronic medical records, like, oh, this will be so great because you don't have to find charts, everything will be right there. The reality is now is because there's only a handful of approved EHRs or electronic health records, you don't have a choice. And they change things in there, like like every other program you use, an update goes in and all your buttons got moved. And
Mm-hmm.
and when those buttons are a workflow that you're working through, and the neurology behind it of how the brain sees patterns, and you do things subconsciously without thinking about it, when you start to move those buttons, it's actually a huge disruption to your workflow. And so you have those frustrations on almost a daily basis. And and then it used to be that, doctors were in private practice and hospitals really wanted you to operate there. And so it worked on more of a business model where let us serve you and give you a great experience, which allowed you to take the best care of your patients. Now that's switched to an employee employer model where you have admin people saying, oh, this is the way we're going to do it because it's better. We had a meeting And our data says this is better, but that data misses all of the nuances, maybe not
Yeah.
all of them, but a lot of them. So it just builds these layers of frustration. And so for me, those were the things that really started weighing and became highly frustrating
Mhm.
and led through a process of burnout and then trying to recover and all kinds of coping mechanisms and good ones and bad ones. And but through that process, going, okay, I've found a way to be and do my job that it's okay. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. But I'm not going to be able to do this till I'm 70.
Yeah.
When you look at some of the old docs who worked for forever. And so I got to find something else to replace my income.
Yeah. I see a lot of doctors. I have a lot of doctor friends. I've interviewed a lot of doctors over the years, or high earners. And what I see with high earners or high earning potential, make a lot of money, and then lifestyle increases. Right? You've spent your whole life getting this degree. You racked up a bunch of debt, and then they tell you your house is your best investment. So they get this big ass house, and now they're working to pay off the house, and then of course they got the new BMW or Porsche or fill in the blank, and then they married and kids, and then before you know it, you're working to support a lifestyle, and now you're caught in the rat race of high earning, and burnout happens there. Do you see that happen with your doctor friends?
I do a lot. And it kind of sneaks up on them, and you want to send your kids to a good school. So now they're in private school. And even then, this is what I've seen with a lot of young docs. They've got young kids. Once their kids start in private school, then the car that they were okay with now isn't good enough, because when they're picking their kids up, they're feeling like they're the poor person at the school. And sometimes when you're going to school with industrialists, you can't keep up. So
Yeah.
yeah, you get in that rat race.
Yeah, for sure. And we could all say, especially for people who go to school for a long time, highly disciplined, super intelligent, right? It takes brains to get through it. But yet we could still get caught in the rat race, and we could still get caught in keeping up with whoever the hell the Joneses are, right? They have unlimited money, and we're always trying to catch up with those guys.
It's so true. And I think a hard thing for doctors is when they look, and we've all seen this, that the Joneses were the C students. and
It's for sure.
and you hear them complain. You're like, wait, that guy in high school didn't go to school. He barely graduated, and then he went to business school and he partied, and now he's killing it, and it's not right.
Yeah, it's so true. But if you compare, this is kind of a side note, but if you compare to anyone, you're never going to measure up, and you're not going to find happiness in there, right? You took a different approach, and you said, I've got to start figuring this out, because I'm not going to do this to 70 years old. I got to start figuring this out now. And a light bulb switch, which took you down a path of investing. Before you go there, what was the light bulb that went off for you that made you go, I might not do this to 70. I need to have another plan? What was that?
um I there had been hurdles along the way, like this thing I want to do that kind of kept me going.
Yeah.
I think I went to medical school later, so I don't know if I was your average. I didn't dream to be a doctor my whole life. And there was this, oh, I want to be this good of a surgeon. I want to. And so there was this series of events where I realized I was doing all the big cases, and I was as good as most everybody else at all the cool things. And then, yeah, some of the other things that made you feel like you had reached it. I bought my wife a Mercedes, and then it was just really expensive to maintain and didn't take the kids to school any better.
Yeah.
And we bought the big house, luckily not a super big house. But then you're like, okay, I've got all the things that had kind of been on the checklist, and all the drive was gone. And kind of about the same time, my kids got to middle school. So I think when my kids were little, that was a lot of my joy. I would leave work and I had these two amazing little people who loved to see me come home, and we had so much fun. And then all of a sudden they're gone and they're like, whatever, dad, I'm going to my friend's house. And so like a lot of like my work motivations went away, my family distraction went away, and I had to kind of rethink things. Um and it really, there was, I think there was this burnout underneath, but there was this drive pushing through it. And all this was right around when I turned 50. And so I remember sitting down and going, God, 50th birthday. And I'm like, this stinks. And you're like, well, wait a minute. Let's put a new twist on it. I'm going to make this decade the best of my life.
Mhm.
I was like, wow, I had a lot of fun in my 20s. This is a big ask.
Yeah, that's crazy, right?
So I started digging in, and through that actually um got into a bunch of personal development stuff and hired a coach, and it was really when I got in there that it was like peeling back the layers of the onion that was like, I really don't like this. I've had these things that I've kind of justified. So then with the coach actually is where we worked backwards and said, what's your ideal lifestyle? What do you want to do every day? How do you want to get up? Do you want to travel? Do you want to be in one place? Where do you want to live? And so as we worked backwards from that, it became more and more clear that being tied to a 60 plus hour a week
Yeah.
surgical practice was not leading down to the road to my ideal lifestyle.
Yeah. Man. So for you, it was a family. It was orientated around family, right? When they're young and you're working to build a family, it's exciting, there's energy. And then when the kids start going to middle school and start leaving, you're kind of left with your own self and your wife and your own thoughts, right? And now 50 happens. That's a turning point for a lot of men.
It really is. And now that I've heard more people talk about it, for some it's 40. We didn't have kids till we were older. So,
Yeah.
if you had kids younger, it may be 40 where it hits you, but it does. And maybe that's that midlife crisis. Your purpose
Hmm.
kind of goes away or changes. And you're like, what am I doing?
Yeah. See, that happens. I think, and maybe I'll have you back on our show for men. We have a show that we talk about identity and purpose and mission, and it's one of my favorite things to talk about in this world. But this is the deal scout. But behind every deal maker, there's a story, and I like to get to the bottom line to what drives deal makers and what creates a good deal maker. So I have to peel back some of that. But you said something that I haven't seen a lot of doctors do, especially when you get to the level of surgeon and specialist, right? You hired a coach. You didn't like things were going. You hired a coach rather than go buy a yacht, go buy another house, beach house, plane, fill in the blank, or chase whatever. What made you think to do that? Because that's a big step.
It was little steps that got me there. It was actually when I was in college, one of the things I did was race bikes, and I was never very good at it, but I really enjoyed it. And so as part of this transition, I'm like, okay, I'm going to get in shape. And I started when I was in college. I always wanted to race cyclocross, but it's like in the winter in the mud, and I could barely afford to keep my bike going for the road season. I'm like, the last thing I need to do is take it out and destroy it in the mud. So I started racing cyclocross, and I thought I was going to be pretty cool, and I just got thrashed. So I'm like, all right, I got to do something different here. I'm hating this. I got to be better than that. So I started going to the gym, and I was like, I'm going to get hurt. I haven't been in the gym in 30 years. And so I hired a personal trainer, and lo and behold, 2 months later, I won a race. And
Yeah.
I was, and this is like Masters Cat 4. So it was, I beat the old slow guys. And sorry to any old slow guys out there, but we all know where we're at in the pecking order of the world.
Yeah.
So, so the next summer, I'm like, wow, okay, I want to be even better. So then I hired a cycling coach, and all my numbers went through the roof, and all. So I had, success I never had before. as a cyclist. Now, it's a lot of the really fast guys had quit racing, so maybe it was just the endurance that I was still out there.
Yeah, you just lasted longer. You stuck in the game longer than they did.
But but it was that where I looked, and when I was trying to make these changes, I started reading different books and realizing how much my mindset was holding me back. And that's when I said, well, wait, these other coaches, I just leapt forward in ways I never would have on my own. Let's give this coaching thing a try. Where before I wouldn't have. I would have been like, oh yeah, these I would have downplayed it all. But that's really what led me there, is the little baby steps.
Yeah. Now, in the green room prior, when you were learning to pronounce the word in my in my waiting room, you said that there's one thing that you really want people to hear, and especially to your fellow doctor peers, right? There's a mindset, there's a belief system being a doctor, and it holds a lot of people back. Will you share that with us?
Well, yeah, as a doctor, you spend so many years training and going to school and learning to do things just right and becoming an expert. And maybe the contrast is that we touched on before, the C student who's now the CEO, that they went through a process of, they failed tests. They did good enough to pass. And so they did, a lot of people who didn't just excel in school develop, whether it's grit or just being used to figuring things out and failing, that they work through those things, and it actually opens doors later on. Whereas a doctor, you were A students in school, and in college, and then you went to medical school and then residency, and the whole focus is being an expert and doing things right. And when you get into an uncomfortable place, it's really uncomfortable. And so when I started learning about real estate, it was a slow process of getting through the emotion of, I don't know what I'm doing. And then you'd learn something, and then you'd realize how much you still don't know, and that I'll never be able to do this. And as I've talked to other docs now that I'm doing it, there's a real, it pushes a button, and I can kind of see their expression change the moment that that discomfort sets in, and they almost just check out. I had one doc, it was this really cool conversation, and then they just instantly like turned a corner and went, well, I'm happy with my 401k.
Yeah.
Conversation over.
Done.
And it hit me. I was like, wow, like that just, it hit a run to the safe place. And it was just done. It was too much.
Yeah. You know, we describe this as a deal maker. We look at different types of investments, and I want to hear your foray into investing. But we get this, into comfort level. I know I'm making this much. I know I'm spending this much. Maybe if there's a little bit, but I'm comfortable with someone, and you even said it with the administration that comes in. They're like, let's go from private practice to group practice. They're going to take care of my future. The 401k, they're going to take care of it. I'm going to get Social Security. That's going to take care of my future, right? So we put our future in a lot of different people's hands, and it's comfortable because we can focus on what we're doing. You started taking your future into your own hands. You hired a coach, and you found out through some coaching that you wanted to move in a different direction. Walk us through like some of the things that you learned and stepping out of your comfort zone into investing. What did that look like?
So originally was the, how are you spending your money? And we had looked for years at buying a second home. We're in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and wanted a place actually where I'm at now in Marquette, Michigan, up on the shores, beautiful Lake Superior.
Beautiful.
But when we came down to it, it was during COVID, actually, when it's like, we were going on these great vacations every year. And then all of a sudden, all that was over. And it's like, going into the second year was like, we're not going anywhere this year. Still, it's time. Let's buy the place up there so we have a place to get away to. And as I started looking, we looked at several places, and I'm going, wow, should I put this money? Should I invest it? I wanted to and we were more looking like, well, maybe a second home and we can do it as an STR, and that would be good. That's a better use of our money. And then this fourplex dropped on the market on a cool location. And I, having been through this process of trying to rethink where I put my money and the control and how it could grow, I knew this was something I wanted to do. I was scared because we had tried rental once before, moved and kept a house and rented it, total disaster. And the landlord thing was a disaster. But through the coaching was like, guess what? You're going to do something new. You're going to be bad at it and you're going to fail and you're going to figure it out. And so that's the way I went into managing this was I'm going to be bad at it. I'm going to figure it out. And then got the plan like, okay, then we're going to scale. But I want to know what's going on with the property management before we start handing off to property managers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the fourplex, brilliant move, right? And you were doing short-term rentals, STR, right? Or
Yeah,
you were figuring
well,
that out?
we actually ended up as a lot of cities have now put the kibosh on short-term rentals is the city put a limit on the number of short-term rentals and they issued licenses and a limited number. And everybody who is at least in the know at all grabbed one, even if they never planned on renting it, just in case they wanted it in the future. So we've been on the license wait list for almost 3 years. And I think we've moved up like 2 spots.
Oh gosh.
So no STR.
No
So that
STR.
part of the plan didn't work out. So that was
Yeah.
part of, again, like we got this great plan. In surgery, if our plan had gone that sideways, it would have been a bad outcome. But
Right.
that you can go and you can learn.
Yeah. Well, what I love about this, and I think we all get it, right? Because, anybody with kids or anybody, adults listening in, we knew when we started fill in the blank, anything, we sucked at it. We were terrible at it. But over time, we got better. But we reached this level of good in your job, right? I'm pretty darn good at fill in the blank. And then we don't want to step back to bad at anything, right?
Yes. And that was part of one of the things with the coach that it was, we talked about being comfort or caged. And the two things that keep you from moving out of there are you feel stuck and you can't see a way out. That's the caged. Or you're just comfortable and you don't want to let go of the comfort. And you kind of bounce back and forth between those two sometimes.
Yeah.
And it leads to inaction. And then as a doctor, then, if you're trying to escape, often you end up in the analysis paralysis where you keep, oh, that's pretty good, but what am I missing? And you never jump in.
Yeah. So you got into this, this first kind of real estate investment, but since then you've been able to get to the place where you've got, part-time doctor, you could kind of go in but you've built up income somewhere. What did that look like? How did you do it?
So I'd have to say at this point, I'm happy that as we tried to build our small residential multifamily empire, my whole plan, prices were running up and nothing penciled out.
Yeah.
And people kept buying stuff. And I'm like, what am I doing? The numbers wrong. Like this duplex sold for, $75,000 more than I could pencil it to make it worth my time. And, and then you realize people are just banking on appreciation and that you're really competing with retail investors. And I'm a retail investor too. So it was a more difficult space. So then in looking for other options, I ended up moving to investing passively in syndications to moving that leverage, like, okay, let's go with some pros. And now how do we get above the retail investor? And so that was a few years of that, but I still was not going fast enough. I still needed to make the money to invest to get to job optional. So we weren't getting there. And we started looking at the idea of, okay, how do I think bigger? bigger apartment buildings.
Mhm.
Now you start looking at syndication models and all of that. And again, up until when interest rates went up, that whole multifamily space also was highly competitive.
For sure.
And now I'm so happy that that happened, because that pushed me into looking at other asset classes and into retail and industrial.
Man, super cool. You know, I'm a huge fan of industrial, right? I think that that's going to be the future, and that's the direction we're spending a lot of time, exploring. You chose retail, kind of like paint a picture for your retail hypothesis and industrial hypothesis.
Um, again, and coming back and it really, the book Who Not How. And
Yes, good
it
book.
just it rings so true. And for years I didn't read it because I'm like, well, I understand that. You need the right people. And then when I finally read it, it was like this, oh no, it's not just, it's that is it.
Yeah,
Don't if you don't know something, what you could spend a year learning, you could find a week finding the right person and it's done.
yeah,
And then another week and it's done. And in a year, you're 52 steps up the ladder instead of one. And that was really when I took that to heart. So it was okay, let me find the right people. And then actually joined a mastermind in that space. And so there are experienced people in both spaces, which the great thing is now having a group that I can find deals and
hmm,
and bring it to highly seasoned people and rip them apart. Is this as good as it looks?
yeah,
And that was what really gave me the confidence to say, okay, now I can be work optional.
yeah.
I've got the network to do what I want to do and do it successfully. It's just me having the time and the guts to do it.
The guts to do it. Yeah. So now, when you find yourself back with a scalpel in hand, back at the job, is it a different experience for you now that you're learning a new skill set? You're failing over here, you're figuring it out, like the way your brain works, you're like, I'm going to be really good at this. So you're like, it there's something happened in your mind over here, a growth mindset happens. How's it affecting your other job?
Uh, to be honest, in a lot of ways, it makes the pain points more painful,
Oh,
the
yeah.
things you can't change. Um, and so some of them I've been able to let go, other ones just hurt even more. Um, the
Mm,
some of the risk of doing surgery, like you can't do a lot of surgery without complications. It's just part of the game. It's just like you can't do real estate without having a bad deal or something that takes a bunch of work to fix.
yeah.
And when there was no way out, complications are part of the game. As one of my early mentors told me, they're like, man, it's a full contact sport. And you're like, yeah, that's the way I feel. I feel like I just got knocked out. And so those types of complications hurt more. And you're like, I don't know if I want to do this. And so it has affected what I want to do. And so I've turned over a lot of higher risk, more complex cases to my partners.
Yeah.
And it's also some of the big stuff is the fun stuff. And so they haven't really, they've been excited. They're like, you don't want to do those anymore. And they're like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what you're describing is choice and options. You have created choice and options. There's a lot of doctors, high earners, professionals spent their life becoming that, but they have no choice and options because that is their only thing. Their only whatever, because the 401k doesn't kick in till they're 65. So they got another 15 years of grind before they can access that or whatever, fill in the blank, right?
Yep.
But you have options.
Yeah. And and that is liberating.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been interesting talking now that I have those options, talking to some of my peers. And one of my current partners was interested, was funny. He's like, when I told him I was cutting back and moving towards being done, he was like, you're not having fun anymore. I'm like, no. And he's like, oh, I still have a lot of fun. And he still loves it. But now that this is really kicking in for me,
Yeah.
he's even asked, like, well, what are these deals you have going? What is that? Because he has some other things going on the outside. And he's like, oh, so there are a lot of doctors who are interested, but I think
Mhm.
the holdback is knowledge and trust.
Mhm.
And the trust thing is, I got for my first call from a stockbroker, like random cold call, like the week after I graduated from medical school. They got some list from somewhere.
Yeah.
And he thinks he's, I'm like, dude, do you understand? Like I'm a week out from starting my internship where I'm going to make like half of minimum wage, but it's legal. Uh, you know,
Yeah.
I'm going to work 120 hours a week for $23,000 a year. I'm not the golden cow you're looking for. So, but you start seeing that where you feel like everybody, you have work done on your house and you get the doctor price, we always called it, and so you develop this distrust of everybody. And so it makes it hard to go into a new investing thing because you feel like somebody sees you as somebody who is an easy mark.
Mhm.
And so it's really trying to find people who you trust.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the doctor's dilemma. You make a lot more, right? You start to the earning potential goes up and you can work more cases, you take on more complicated cases, right? So the earning potential, but you get to this point where everything just starts costing a lot more anyways.
Yeah.
Jeez, that's crazy. I'm not a doctor, so I haven't thought of that. So you started investing in retail and industrial. This is why I like industrial is I think with the future of Amazon and shipping and manufacturing and all this stuff, like industrial is a place they need a place to do it. And I just think that that's going to grow more and more. I might be wrong. I'm curious, all the listeners out there, like what is your favorite asset class in commercial real estate to invest in? And I'd love to know why and maybe have you guys come on the show and talk about it. But back to you, doctor, is as you go through this, what does a 5-year win look like for you? You turned 50 not too long. How long ago was that? I'm going to ask you how old you are.
4 years ago.
Okay, cool. All right. So you and I were going to chat when you turned 60, right? We're
All
hanging
right.
out together and we look back and you're like, man, we accomplished a lot together. What's a 6-year goal for you where you're like, man, if I could get there, my wife and I will be very happy.
To go out 6-year goal is more that ideal lifestyle
Mm-hmm.
that we will spend months a year traveling overseas.
Cool.
And that we can go when we need to, that we have money to, if our kids want to start a business, we can
Yeah.
be their angel investor. And have the network to help them also, not just me.
Yeah.
That's a big thing that as I've gone down this road and building that network and the amazing people, like I didn't even know this stuff. I was too stuck being an A student when I was 20 years old.
Yeah.
So really that's the bigger picture. So where does that lead into? There's certain numbers you put out there. One of the numbers in my mind is, a $10 million net worth. Why? Because you can take some pretty big hits without it affecting your lifestyle at that point.
Yeah.
If you can lose $1 million and not go to bed and not worry about it,
Yeah.
that's one of the goals.
Yeah.
And so then deals aren't as stressful because you can do some misses and it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Nah, super cool. So as you're moving along, right, working optional, you're building this out, you're doing retail and industrial, and you're investing in deals side by side with people. You hired a coach, you've been a part of a mastermind. Like you're going through the right steps or the smart steps, right? You're doing it with and through other people. Just like if I needed surgery on my, urology reproductive parts, I would go to a guy like you who's done it 1,000 times and say, hey, what's going on with this thing, right? Versus, like we're going out into the world of investments looking for that. So I really want to honor you, and I think you're doing your right move. So what kind of deals are you looking for? What kind of opportunities, should people come chat with you about?
Um, Things I'm excited about right now are neighborhood retail.
Okay.
Especially in areas where uh, there's not room for expansion, and in neighborhoods that don't want a bunch of building, because people more so and more so are not wanting to drive as far to get stuff. And so there's a big moat for competition for these small neighborhood retail centers, because businesses want to be in there, and there's not a lot of competition for them. So those I love.
Yeah.
Versus the big, I used to love the sexy class A, next to the mall with all the shiny big name businesses.
Yeah.
Though a lot more competition there and a lot lower cap rates. Neighborhood retail is awesome.
Yeah.
That and flex space, as
Okay.
you're saying, the big industrial warehouse
Yeah.
is feels a little bit of a reach for me right now. And you get in with some really big players there, but the last leg delivery, the smaller flex warehouse, or even down to the almost expanded self-storage where it's the contractor garage, 10,000 square feet. So that 10,000 to 100,000 is a pretty cool space too.
Yeah. We're working on a flex space deal, and it's super cool, man. You have options. I think options are what I love, right? Just in case, hey, this doesn't work, we could try this. We could try this. There's options.
Yeah, the number of things that can go in flex space.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's flex space.
That's why it's flex space. So, Dr. Mike, where could people go to connect with you and maybe do a deal?
Probably the easiest way, you can get a hold of me on LinkedIn.
Cool.
Um, we have a podcast, Surgeon Syndicate, that's really aimed at probably people that are a few steps behind your average listener, that really trying to get into the space. And it's really talking to docs who, asking questions about questions I ask,
Yeah.
to try and get that information out. So through the podcast, the website there is surgeonsyndicate.com, or our private equity company is called Fortress Capital, or thefortresscapital.com website. That's in the process. I got to leave it to the tech guys because it's really outside of my strength there. That
Who,
is
not how,
being,
right?
yeah, it's being redone, and it's going to be completely changed over soon, but I'm not sure where that's at.
Cool.
So,
and that's your private equity. So you got your podcast. So for all you people out there who are interested in the space and interested in hearing from a surgeon's perspective, and talking with other doctors, Surgeon Syndicate, that's your podcast. So check them out. Listen into an episode or two, download it, give them a raving review. And then the Fortress Capital is the private equity group that you guys are looking at doing these types of investments with and through. Is that correct?
yes.
Very cool. What's a question I should have asked you that maybe I screwed up and did not ask you?
Well, you got a lot of, we got to really the doctors and why they don't, the neighborhood retail. Probably the biggest one is what's been the biggest change for me is medical school and residency. It's this highly competitive process. And although deals can be competitive to get in real estate, the thing I found is it changes. And for the doctor mindset, this is awesome, that the helping others. And when I went to this mindset of, all right, what do I have to offer? Because when I really wanted to get in the room with people who could help me take the next step, and when somebody told me, they're like, you got to find out what is your value to them. And then you start offering value to everybody around you. and opportunity just comes rolling in that you never expected and coming from people you never expected that it would come from.
Hmm.
And it's almost like you start trying to outgive what's being given back, and sometimes it's hard.
Yeah. That's such a cool place to be. So you go from a place of a very highly competitive spot, right? To a place of within masterminds and within this world of syndication. It's like, hey man, how could I bless you? How could I help you? Let me open up the door for you. Hey, this investors might not be a good fit for us, but here you go. And there's this world of like giving and supported and listing up. It's really bizarre, but I love it. Right?
It is. I mean, even yesterday, I called a guy to look at a strip center deal
Yeah.
that was from somebody that I had just met and had on the show, but he's a strip center guy, and said, "Would you look at this deal?" He's looking for me to help him raise some capital.
Hmm.
Uh, want an expert opinion on it. What came out of that was he's like, "Hey, uh, this broker I work with just sent me a deal. It's smaller than I want to do. Let me send it to you. I would love to take care of my broker and get his deal sold for him if it's something you're interested in." So it's one of the better deals I've had laid in my lap. And it's just becomes this like back and forth, and our relationship started that he needed to close out a syndication and had a little bit of space. And my sister-in-law called me and was like, "You're doing commercial real estate. I want to do some of that. Oh, strip malls, those are awesome." So I put her in the deal. No, you know, just straight up good for you, good for him.
Yeah.
And now we got this great relationship. And so it's been pretty cool.
Yeah. So what we'll do is we'll put your thank you for sharing that, man. That is really neat. It is such a cool world where you can work with people and you're actually trying to help other people. You still want to make money. You still want to have a bright future. We still want to celebrate your 60th birthday and come back here in 6 years and chat about it. But doing it together is really valuable and it's fun. Like I was just telling my he's like a COO, CFO yesterday. It's fun to work with a team. It's fun to work with other people headed in the right direction. So, um, man, Dr. Mike, I really appreciate you coming on the show. Really appreciate inspiring me and my audience about what you're working on. Fellow audience members and listeners, fellow deal makers, reach out to our guests. Say thank you for being on the show, sharing their knowledge. Their contact information will be in the show notes, so you can connect with them on LinkedIn and say, hey, I heard you on the show, and maybe we can do a deal together or work together on something. That's the mission and purpose of what we do here, put deals and deal makers together. I hope you guys are having an awesome day. And as always, you could head over to thedealscout.com, fill out a quick form if you want to come on the show, or maybe if you are looking at doing some acquisitions or if you need some help with the financing side of things, I would love to take a look at a deal with you. So once again, that's thedealscout.com, fill out a quick form, and we'll chat then. Till then, I hope you guys are having an amazing day. See you on the next episode. Bye, everybody.